Hey learner, welcome back to my channel. In our previous video, we know about GDP, or it's called gross domestic product, where the gross domestic product is the market value of all the final goods and services produced within a country in a given time period, or it's must in a year or in a quarter of the year, like that. The GDP is the official recognized totals. That means the total things or the total income or total earning of a country. GDP can be determined in three ways, all of which should theoretically give the same result. These are the first expenditure method or expenditure approach, next a factor incomes approach, and the third is production approach, or we must say that value added approach or value of output. Whereas the following equation is used to calculate the GDP, that is GDP is C plus I plus G plus X minus M, where C denoted private consumption, I denoted investment, G government spending, and X net export, and M means net import. This method is usually called the expenditure method. Remember that C plus I plus G are expenditures on final goods and services. Expenditure on intermediate goods do not count in calculating GDP. The second way of estimating GDP is to the sum of primary incomes distributed by redirecting producer units. So if GDP is calculated this way, it is sometimes called gross domestic income or GDI, where the GDI and the GDP all are same. Therefore, the GDP equals to GDI. Means these are the similar to calculate the GDP in case of the income approach. This reported by the National Statistical Agency, where GDP equals to total national income plus sales tax plus depreciation plus net foreign factor, where we concluded that sales tax, it means that the consumer taxes that the consumer paid to the government in case of the government earning because of the sales of the product, where the total national income is the sum of the all wages, rents, interest, and the profit also. Another way, the depreciation equals to cost allocated to a tangible asset. And other thing is a net foreign income. It means the difference between the total income that a country's citizens and companies generate in the foreign countries versus the total income foreign citizens and companies generate in that country. So, in another case, the third part, the way of estimating GDP is the production approach, that we must say that value output or the value added approaches. In case of the value added approaches, suppose an example. A wheat farmer grows a bushel of wheat at a cost of $1. Suppose a mill buys the wheat for $1 to turn into the flour, which costs $2. A baker buys the flour for $2 to turn into bread, which costs $5. A grocer buys the bread for $5 to sell it to consumers for $9. So here the value added is a $1 minus $0 because they grow the wheat. So there's a price of inputs are 1. Another case 2 minus 1 is also 1. And the value added of the third case, the baker buys the flour, where it's 5 minus 2 because he sold it in a cost of the $5. So it's $3. And the final product or the finished goods is $4. Remember that if we sum up A plus B plus C, we got $1 plus $1, 2 plus $3, it's 5. But the value added is the final product's prices is $4. because we concluded the $4, the last final good, because we know that the GDP is the market value of all final goods, not intermediate goods. Gross value added equals to gross value of output and the value of intermediate consumption. On other case, remember the production approach example, where the production approach is a $9 minus $5. It's got $4. Okay. So there are certain drawbacks of the GDP, some criticism of the GDP as a measure of economic output. Let's check about that. The first, it does not account for the underground economy. Obviously, GDP relies on the official data, so it does not take into account the extent of the underground economy, which can be significant in some nations. The second, it is an imperfect measure in some cases. Suppose GDP does not take into account the profits earned in a nation by overseas companies that are remitted back to the foreign investors. The third, it emphasizes economic output without considering economic well-being. Of course, we must suppose an example, just like a nation may be experience rapid GDP growth, but this may impose a significant cost to society in terms of environmental impact and moral hazard and an increase in income disparity. So there is a problem to emphasize economic output. Another is a disaster can raise GDP. Obviously, rebuilding after a disaster or war can greatly increase the economic activity and boost it in the case. Although economists are constantly working on other ways to measure an economy, GDP is still the best indicator of nation's overall economic health. In spite of its lots of shortcomings, we always calculate our nation's growth through GDP, obviously. So that's all for today. In our next video, we will talk about nominal and the real GDP briefly. So we conclude here. Please like and share, subscribe the channel and press bell icon for the further notification. Thank you, and thank you so much, and have a good day.